Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lieutenant Colonel Pip Cleary. On this day, 104 years ago, Australian soldiers entered the Allied offensive on the Somme battlefield in France for the first time. The British Army's losses on the Somme over the previous 3 weeks had been immense. Now it was Australia's turn. On the 23rd of July 1916, the soldiers of the 1st Australian Division assaulted and captured the strongly fortified village of Pozières. They held the position under heavy German artillery fire before being withdrawn 5 days later, having lost 5,300 men. 2 more Australian divisions were rotated through the battle in turn. Over the following 6 weeks, the Australians made 19 attacks on a narrow 1-mile front. They were subjected to an almost continuous German bombardment of ferocious intensity, greater than anything they had faced before. The constant rain of heavy artillery shells killed, buried and maimed soldiers, testing their reserves of courage and stretching their will to the breaking point. The Australians were relieved by the Canadian Corps on the 5th of September and had succeeded in advancing the British front line just over 1.5 miles, and at a terrible cost. Charles Bean later wrote in his official history of war, "On that crowded mile of summit, the 3 Australian divisions engaged and lost 23,000 officers and men in less than 7 weeks." Tonight we'll tell the story of just one of those thousands of Australians who died in the Battle of Pozières. This evening we're honoured to acknowledge Mr John King, President, Return and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament flowers of the forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private John Adams. John Adams was born on the 15th of February 1894 in Tumbarumba, New South Wales, the son of travelling salesman William Adams and his wife, Martha. John was one of 9 children in his family, and he received his education at Tumbarumba Public School. At the outbreak of war in 1914, he was working as a farm labourer near Cootamundra. John Adams enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 25th of July, 1915, along with his older brother George. The brothers underwent training in Sydney and were assigned to the 20th Battalion. They embarked in Sydney aboard the troop ship Euripides at the beginning of November. They arrived in Egypt in February 1916 and spent the month training with their battalion before embarking for France in March. The brothers' first major action with their battalion on the Western Front took place around the French village of Pozières in July 1916. The German forces had a distinct advantage, holding the high ground, which enabled them to launch devastating attacks on advancing troops. The weight of artillery fire razed entire villages to the ground and made capturing the strategic village a treacherous and seemingly impossible task. The offensive at Pozières took place over 42 days. The Australians made as many as 19 separate attacks against German positions, finally succeeding in capturing Pozières on the 5th of August, but not without tremendous cost. By the end of the battle, there were 23,000 Allied casualties, captured, wounded or killed. Among the dead was 23-year-old Private John Adams. Adams's company was undertaking a raid on German lines on the 25th of July when he was hit while crossing no man's land. He was severely wounded in the chest, and his comrades moved him to a shell hole to shield him during their advance. The following morning, when the dead and wounded were being retrieved, Private Adams could not be found. That same day, his brother George was awarded the Military Medal for his role in leading a bombing party further up the line. Adams's father William pleaded with military authorities to provide him with information on his boy. Although the young private seemed to have vanished without a trace, the Red Cross investigated and concluded that he had been killed during the raid on the 26th of July 1916. Adams's comrade recalled the night he was killed, saying, "I saw Adam shot through the lung and lying on the ground midway between our trenches and the Germans' trenches at Pozières. Our lieutenant said to leave him as it was useless to remove him." The tremendous shelling which took place around Pozières left little hope of locating Private Adams alive, nor the location of his final resting place. His body was never recovered from the battlefield, and today he is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, along with more than 10,000 Australians who have no known grave. When his father William died in 1922, John's name was added to his headstone, a permanent memorial to the boy who never came home. John's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of the Adams brothers is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. In this image, John Adams is seated on the left while his brother George is standing beside him. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private John Adams, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember that. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.